Hey folks, welcome to the Unsung Podcast. I am your host, Mark Fraser. I am once again joined, as ever, by the smell I just can't get rid of, Mr. Christopher Cusack.
Hi.
And we have a guest this week. Christopher threatened Babs with a millionaire episode, and he's now making good on that threat.
Yeah, I threatened Babs with an un-Brexit. I was like, if you don't do this episode, we'll let England rejoin the EU, and then you'll have to deal with them again.
Oh, then I'm leaving. Goodbye. I'd love UK to rejoin.
Babs, do you speak French or German?
I speak both. French decently, German not at all decently.
Can you introduce the podcast in French and German, please?
What? Oh, fuck, no. Bienvenue à what's unsung? I guess pas chanter. Le podcast qui ne chante pas. If we're doing literal translations. German, what would it be? Nicht singen, nicht gesangen. I apologise. My European credentials down the drain in one.
I feel quite highbrow and cosmopolitan with our multilingual podcast now. Yep, I have been absolutely choking to do this week's episode for some time. I think Babs was previously on Unsung when we did our double-length Muse marathon, which was really something special. Met with actually a lot of very warm responses from the audience.
Oh, but, nice. The Muse mega mix. Yeah, great.
Yeah. I mean, in fairness, a lot of them were like, oh, it was so nice to hear you make fun of Muse. But don't take that personally, Babs.
Oh, I don't.
but during that show, we stumbled across a few interesting things, and one of those things was that Muse happened to be really big admirers of a band that both myself and Babs are also a fan of, and really there can't be that many other people in the world. It's just you, me and Muse, I think,
and some of Belgium, one would hope, and Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age.
True. But it is so nice to meet somebody who's a fellow traveller with this band. Before we get to that, Mark, do you have any admin?
Yeah, so we have a couple of new subscribers, one this week with the mysterious name of D. So thanks for signing up, D. And this person helped us figure out a small problem we were having with our bonus episodes, of which I have now calculated we have 17. So if you want to hear some of those cool additional things we've done, go to patreon.com/unsung and check out our currently existing tiers where we'll give you some cool stuff. We are about to change that at the start of February. We will announce our brand new, sort of very much shortened version of the Unsung Patreon, where we'll have...
That's a real undersell. Our streamlined but decidedly superior approach to Patreon or subscription, which will have a basic tier and then a couple of things that are a lot more exciting. And we're not just talking about it, we've actually started doing it as well, because there's quite a lot of stuff behind the scenes that we had to start putting in place to make it work. And we've done that. We've put our money where our mouth is. We will absolutely fess up on what this is all about really soon, I would say, in the next week. But until then, yeah, you'll just have to trust us that it's pretty gallus. Oh, while we're talking about special bonus episodes, you really got to try and get a listen to the episode we did on Kiss, which was recorded in the second week of lockdown. Now, the episode we did on Kiss, I think, is only available on Mixcloud. Is that right, Mark?
It's on Mixcloud and it's also on Patreon.
Patreon, right? It's not on our Spotify. It's not on even the apps for bonus things, because it was actually recorded as a radio show, so it's got full length tracks in it, and we that just complicated where we could upload it to. And it's just myself and my often mentioned flatmate Luigi with a bottle of whiskey and too much Kiss for one lifetime. If you're having any problems locating the double length Kiss mixtape, please get in touch. We'll help you find it. It's really worth the journey. I have a few bits actually of my own admin for this week. One of them was brought to our attention by Vicky, our co-host, who will be joining us next week on the album that we'll announce at the end of the episode. Vicky did point out that during our recent Slayer episode, which also went down surprisingly well, we made an analogy of the big four of thrash, comparing them to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles, depending on your perspective. And yet, despite the fact we were talking about Slayer, we failed to make a joke about Shredder.
God damn.
That is some half-ass podcasting, and she was right on it, and that is why we need to widen the talent pool on this podcast. So Vicky will be back in next week with her quick fire wit. Kudos to you. Babs, have you heard the new Muse single?
I haven't. I now follow them on Instagram from the podcast's account. So I see so much more content than I did before. I've seen the visuals for it, but I haven't dared. What's the consensus here?
I mean, true to form, the visuals are sort of some dark, shadowy figure sort of addressing a series of other dark, shadowy figures gathered around some sort of boardroom table in some kind of Illuminati headquarters, as per. But Mark, what was it you described it as? They'd stumbled across a bunch of discarded new metal riffs.
Yeah, they've basically found new metal. Like 20 years after everyone else, they've decided that this is
20 years, 25.
Yeah, 25 years after everyone else. It has proper, like, almost Korn style riffs, and even got a screaming bit in it, which is just, I can't even believe I'm saying that about Muse, but yeah, it's quite the thing to behold.
Babs, we obviously gave them a wee bit of a hard time that episode, all of us, especially in the latter stages of their career. I would say it's potentially a new low.
Oh my God, I was going to say, I can't tell from the description whether it's a good thing or a bad thing because, okay, so it's absolutely appalling.
It's absolutely.
I mean, listen, I think COVID has made some people dig deep in the depths for creativity, and I think it's rendered others insane. So
yes,
let's see what the full album will bring.
Very much the latter. The last bit of admin I have to do is to say that this week's episode has made me really get the Prince buzzer primed, because that is going to be getting slapped. So I guess inevitably it's time for Babs to introduce the selection.
So we're going to be talking about Millionaire and their album Outside the Simian Flock.
To set the scene here, Millionaire are definitely one of the more obscure bands we've covered. I didn't actually think they were as obscure as it turns out they are, in the sense that their first two albums have two of the most basic Wikipedia pages I've ever seen, and their third and fourth album don't even have a Wikipedia page, which, given that I know local bands that have Wikipedia pages for their records, I thought that was pretty astonishing.
That doesn't surprise me. Belgium, I've lived in Belgium for 9 years, and a British friend of mine he'd been in Belgium for half a day, and he's like, they're not very good at selling themselves here, are they? He just picked that up from sort of the lack of advertising in shops. I'm not saying that all of Belgium is like that, but I think that's definitely the case. They should be much more on the internet. And even when you look for Dutch language stuff, because they're from the Flemish part of Belgium, you do have to do quite a bit of digging.
I have a subheading in my notes that just says the weirdness of Belgium, so we'll be drawing upon your experience.
Can't wait to discuss that
heavily for that. But yeah, do you want to do the due diligence on the band?
Yeah, so Millionaire are my, I would say, joint favourite Belgian band, along with dEUS, who are a little bit less obscure and
totally on message with you there.
Yeah, exactly. I have absolutely no idea where I first heard them, how I got into them, but I was living in Luxembourg at the time, and I had some Belgian friends. So I think it was either there or through trying to improve my crap French and German by reading French and German music magazines. And they were formed in, I would say, no offense, my cousin's wife comes from there, a weird part of Belgium, a more rural part of Belgium called Limburg. And in actual fact, so my cousin's wife interviewed Mara Pavlovsky from Evil Superstars and dEUS for her school newspaper, because she comes from the same region. So wow. a bit of a connection there. Don't get too jealous. And yeah, so it was formed by Tim Vanhamel. It's really his band. The album we're discussing, he's the only songwriter. And he'd played in Evil Superstars and he played in dEUS, and I think that he wanted this to be his baby. So they made this I saw a review that called it electro grunge album, which I think is not a bad description, because we'll get into it, but every single song does have synths, which is something I didn't realize until listening to it. So I think they were trying to say that it's a rock album, but it's not only kind of like your standard rock album. And, they are big in Belgium. Everyone knows who Tim Vanhamel is. And they came to Josh Homme's attention, Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age. And I found out exactly when. It was when they supported Masters of Reality in Ghent in 2011, because their frontman produced Queens of the Stone Age. And on that bill was also the De Wale brothers, who were Soulwax. So another big Belgian band. So
who will also get a mention later on. Masters of Reality was Chris Goss's band, that's right, yeah. some good records. A bit stodgy. They've got a little bit of the Screaming Trees kind of stodge about them, but also some...
Screaming Trees will also get a mention, I'm sure, later on as well. Because, so Tim Vanhamel and Josh Homme became close. And, Josh Homme produced the second album. But Aldo Struif, who I think is the keyboard player, has a very close relationship with Mark Lanigan from the Screaming Trees. So really kind of coming across Josh Homme when they did, you'd think would have propelled them, and they supported Muse. I just found out just before the podcast, they supported Muse at the Manchester Apollo in 2001 on the Origin of Symmetry tour. And they're this incredibly innovative band who had, an album in 2002, an album in 2005, and then a massive hiatus, and then 2 more albums in 2017 and 2020. And of course, I'm going to say they're massively underrated, because I think they're producing exactly the type of music that fans of dEUS, Muse, others would be into. You might know their biggest hits, which we're going to discuss, but not much else. And given that Tim Vanhamel also played in the first iteration of Eagles of Death Metal, it's just really surprising how they've remained as low-key as they are.
Yeah, he's got a very storied career of making appearances in interesting places. I've seen them described really fittingly as Prince meets the Sex Pistols.
Exactly. Yeah.
I can't even remember where I read that. So credit to whoever wrote it. I'm sorry, I couldn't get the quote. I actually owe the discovery of Millionaire to friends from back in Stirling, Karen Allen and Jim Taylor, who handed me a CDR with a kind of photocopied cover as well. And it's just they were great at that. They just used to give me obscure stuff, and I have no idea how they came across it, but it was suitably obscure. Especially Jim loves a bit of weird music. I remember we once played a show that he was involved in, and he paid us all in Captain Beefheart albums. And I definitely owe this to them, and it really stuck with me. It's one of those records at first that I didn't pay I got it, I put it on, and I didn't realise how much it had stuck until I realised that about a week later I'd been listening to this relentlessly, and it has never gotten old. There are very few albums I can say that about in my life, that I've had this record for 20 years now and I can still put it on, and I mean, I still take an opportunity to put it on. I mean, I'll DJ this. It's also one of those records that when you DJ it, especially something like Body Experience Review or Champagne, you always get somebody coming up and asking, what is this? This is great. It feels familiar, but they don't actually know it. I absolutely love this band. I knew them as a 5-piece. So as you said, Tim, I got Dave Schroyen on drums, Baz Rehman on bass, Aldo Struif, and a guy called Ben Wires on guitar. Now, he left in 2005 as they were recording their second album, and I spent ages, including translating pages right, left and centre, trying to find out why he left, because it seemed, the way that it's arranged on their Wikipedia, it seems like he's a little bit sort of put off to the side here, and it seems like there may have been a little bit of acrimony. I mean, you don't leave in the middle of a recording session and not piss somebody off, and so, to some extent. So I couldn't quite get to the bottom of that. I've seen them. I saw them supporting Queens of Stone Age in Glasgow.
You did tell me, and I'm still seething with envy. Yep.
Tremendous, like really good. Tim in a sort of Dennis the Menace black and red jumper going absolutely nuts, and they were fantastic. And as much as I loved Queens of Stone Age back then, I think I was just as excited to see Millionaire. Tim, as you said, has quite a few things in his past. He was, his first ever band at the age of 13 was called Sister Poo Poo.
Lovely name, yep.
Brilliant name. He joined Evil Superstars when he was 17 alongside Mario Pavlovsky. He joined in 1985. Mario, as you say, also in dEUS, and has some kind of co-writing credits in this. Tim's in Eagles of Death Metal really early on, 2004, 2005. He also has a project called Eat Lions that I've not listened to.
Me neither, and I didn't realise until I'd done. I mean, as you say, he has his fingers in a lot of pies, as does Aldo as well. But I think that's the Belgian way. It's a small country, and people, are more naturally in each other's bands. And I've seen Millionaire live, but I've seen Tim Vanhamel live in 2 other bands apart from Millionaire as well. So
see, I also didn't know that Aldo and Dave are both in Creature with the Atom Brain.
Yeah.
whose album I have, and it wasn't until we were doing this, I was like, oh shit, are they in that band as well? Who also sound a bit like Queens of Stone Age. Yeah. So, there's definitely a pattern there. Mark, you're a total newbie to this band. In fact, most people are a total newbie to this band. And I have to be honest, I've been itching to text you this week and ask you what you thought, but I wanted to save it up till now. Without getting into detail, what are your first impressions?
They're fine.
They deserve better.
After all that intro, all that build-up. No.
Jesus Christ, they deserve better than you.
I mean, I think that before their hiatus, I think they were a better band.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we'll talk about that as we go along, I guess.
Okie doke. Well, I don't really want to wait about because we need to set the scene for people that aren't familiar. And as I said, I really want to address the weirdness of Belgium. Babs, what the fuck is going on with Belgium?
What the fuck's going on with Belgium? Well, okay, I'll start by defending Belgium and the amazing music scene because I think it's the best country I've lived in. I've lived in 4 countries. It's the best one. It's the one with the most diverse music scene, especially if you go outside the city that you're closest to. So, I live in Brussels. Plenty goes on there. But if you expand out to Antwerp and then to Hasselt, which is where Millionaire come from, the sheer variety of bands is quite something. On the weirdness of Belgium, especially I would say Belgian noise rock, because that is definitely a genre and Millionaire fit into it along with Creature with the Atom Brain and many others who I could get into. I think it's probably due to how quite decentralized Belgium is. So, you've got your capitals, you've got Brussels, you've got Antwerp, which is the biggest city in Flanders, the region where they come from. But it's a country really where lots of people will, if they don't live in the villages where they grew up, they will go there every single weekend. So I think it's a country that's simultaneously, small and cosmopolitan in some areas because it's quite easy to reach everywhere, but also a bit more provincial and weird at other times. And I think it's that kind of atmosphere that just, makes people from a certain region come together and be really experimental. I think listening back to Millionaire and listening back to the album, I was like, this is just someone having a laugh. Like, it's just someone coming together, experimenting with all these different synths and bleepy bloopy things, distortion on voices. And, they have the space for it. I think, I don't know how much musicians are supported in Belgium, because you hear of countries where you can survive, or you hear about the UK in the 80s and 90s where there were what they called I can only think of it in French, bourse, funds for musicians to live off of. It was easier to live off of. And I would guess that musicians in Belgium are decently supported, and experimental bands like Millionaire are decently supported. I think the weirdness of Belgium, or the weirdness of Millionaire, comes from them coming from a very rural part of Belgium, but yet having access to kind of bigger cities. Hasselt's I think the biggest city in their region. It has a university. It has a great music venue called Musikadrome. So there's an openness there, and there's a tolerance of weird, I think.
I'm kind of curious, what's the linguistic breakdown of Belgium like? Where is the divide? So
it's a complicated one. So I live in Brussels, which is technically a bilingual city, but it's primarily French speaking. There are just more French speakers living there than Dutch speakers. Flanders, where Millionaire come from, is a Dutch-speaking region, and Wallonia, where the French speakers come from, are in the south. So Wallonia south, Flanders is north. And Brussels is a city, for example, that in most places that you go to, you have to have information in French and Dutch. There can't be a preference, which is why, for example, a lot of restaurants now have menus in English, because then they have one language and that's it. And there is tension there, because it was a country where Flanders was the poorer region. So all the Dutch people had to learn French, because that was the language you had to learn to kind of, move up in the world. Now that's shifted. Flanders is the richer region. Flemish people all still speak fluent French and very good English, and the Wallonians do not. And there's a bit of tension, of feeling that the poorer part of the country is leeching off the richer part of the country. And the Flemish nationalists have, unfortunately, a big majority. I don't know. I honestly don't know what's going to happen in the next 10, 15 years. I don't know why I'm getting into politics, because I would say Millionaire are not a particularly political band, but that's the backdrop.
I'm just curious, because I saw a couple of the commentaries that were saying the Flemish area was particularly fecund for bands and for unusual music, especially in the 90s.
Yeah, definitely. And what's quite interesting reading about dEUS is they became big in the mid-90s. And people kept saying to them, "Oh, you should move to London or at the very least Amsterdam." And they were like, "Why? Why would we want to move away from Antwerp? Antwerp has everything going for it." Yeah, I think it's the smallness. I think it's the smallness and the mix of provincial weirdness, but access to the big cities. Because one of the weirdest musical experiences I ever had was I went to Genk, which is another city near where Millionaire come from. It's a festival called the Absolutely Free Festival, and it is basically loads of weird regional bands and then one or two big names. So I think it was Mark Kozelek one year, who would have been
Red
another
House
year.
Painters.
The Red House Painters, yeah. I can't remember who it was another year. Maro Pavlovsky was the headliner one of the other years. And I kid you not, there was this performance artist singing in English, okay, so it's not in Dutch, but she had songs with the titles like "Rape Me Till I Come" and "I Want to Fuck." And this was in a festival filled with families with children, and like me and my English speaking friends were like, what the fuck is going on? And everyone just absolutely unbothered by it, just like, yeah, whatever, bring everything together. And then there was another band who, oh god, I need to go and find what they look like, which was the weirdest mixed band I've ever seen, where the lead singer looked like Morrissey, but there was someone who looked like he was in a thrash metal band, someone else was topless, and they all somehow came together to make beautiful music. And it's just tolerated. I think because of there's a culture in Belgium that a lot of non-Belgians who live there might complain about it, which is that if you live in Brussels and you're friends with Belgians who are not from Brussels, unless you have a bad relationship with your family, every single weekend you go home. Every single weekend, especially if you're a student. And I just think it means you live a bit differently. You know, you have your links to your local region, but then also to where you work. And I don't think I've really seen that anywhere else.
Mark, you ever been to Belgium?
I've never been to Belgium. I've always wanted to go. So many years I've promised myself to go to Groza Rock, which is the punk festival that they have. And they always have great American bands and great European bands playing it. I always wanted to go to Brussels.
You should come.
Yeah,
I've been to Belgium a bunch of times, and it's pretty strange. The first place I ever went was Bruges, which is not typical.
Yeah, it's a bubble.
It's very picturesque, beautiful little place, but very much aimed at tourists. With our band, I've been to Brussels. We played in a place called Barlock, a kind of super squat with a skate ramp and stuff.
I know Barlock, yeah.
Yeah, and nearly froze to death. Had to piss outside in the weirdest little urinal I've ever been in. And they had a room that was wall to floor mattresses, the dirtiest mattresses you've ever seen, that we were supposed to sleep in, like some giant insane asylum, and it just didn't happen. Seems like there's a really cool squat scene scattered across the country. It's got a reputation for a lot of underground punk and hardcore. Played some festivals there, like small ones on farms and stuff. It's odd though. It's musically, the identity is not as like France has a vibe, Germany has another vibe, and as much as you're describing the linguistic distribution in Belgium, and there's a sort of Venn diagram where Brussels kind of sits in between them, and there's a meeting there. Belgium for me has like a musical Venn diagram. There's pop, there's bits of like metal, and then there's bits of indie, and then there's bits of electro, and then the music scene of these bands like dEUS included, but especially Millionaire, through to like bands like dEUS. I won't control you, my hands are tied. Got no reason to go. Feel so good moment to talk now. Got no reason to go. Through to bands like Hyper Christmas Tree Fuzz that we mentioned before.
All from different towns in Belgium, by the way.
Musically, they're in this weird Venn diagram place, though, that combines genres in ratios that you don't really find that much elsewhere. The other places tend to commit more in one direction or the other, and Belgian bands are quite happy to straddle these genres in ways that probably also makes it quite hard for them to be marketed. And I say that as someone that's in a band that I think straddles genres. It's difficult because, you're not rocky enough for the rock label, you're not electro enough for the electro label, and A&R people who just want an easy solution to the question of who are they going to take to their bosses that week. They look at you with puzzlement, and I suspect Millionaire are a band that have been looked at in that way very, very frequently. They've had a good relationship with Play It Again Sam, Pius, for people that are not sure what that stands for. They've worked with Mogwai and a lot of other bands as well to good effect. But yeah, the country and its musical output It does have a strange identity, and I don't mean that to be cruel.
Not at all. I have a recommendation for you, which I keep banging on about as well on my podcast. There is an excellent documentary called The Sound of Belgium. And it's basically about how it was Belgium that invented rave culture. It wasn't the UK. It started in Belgium. It's just this fascinating documentary, which also sort of charts post-World War II Belgian history. And yeah, there's a line which is like, because Belgium is such a new country, because I think it was founded in like 1843 or something, you know, it is kind of part of France, part of the Netherlands. Because they said, because it doesn't have its own cultural identity, it had to find its own, especially after World War II. And it was so interesting to see about how that came together because of the motorways that opened, and then people could drive all over the country to all these different parties and bring people together. It was super interesting. And I recommend it even if you're not into the electro side of Belgium, because it's a fascinating music and history documentary.
If you are intrigued by Belgium, I encourage you to go and visit it. I would suggest don't visit the town of Charleroi.
Oh, that's the stereotype.
Really fucking crap. But Babs, places you'd recommend people check out? Brussels, obviously.
Brussels. Well, Ghent is Bruges without the sheen, I would say. That's where Hyper Christmas Tree Fuzz and many others are from. The Limburg countryside, where Millionaire are from, it's lovely. I've been there cycling. There's beautiful cycle paths and stuff. In Wallonia, I would say the town of Mons, which was a European city of culture, whenever it was like 2017 or something, underrated. And basically, one of the best things about Belgium is doesn't matter where you go, there's good beer. So if you're into that, just literally any village, any town, they will have 2 or 3 local beers, and you can drink your way around. And that's
Strong
great.
fucking beers.
Strong fucking beers.
So there's another interesting, what would you call it, idiosyncrasy to the Belgian music scene, and it's a thing called Humo.
Yes.
Humo's Rock Rally. Something that's been running every year since 1978. And Humo, you'll give a better description than I, but as I understand it, it's a sort of magazine, TV, radio, tabloidy kind of entertainment outlet.
Yeah, and Humo's Rock Rally is basically a sort of massive battle of the bands across, I would say across Belgium, but I think it's across Flanders, even though the final is in Brussels most years. And lots of the more famous Belgian bands have come out of that. So basically, I think they ask people from across the country to submit demos. It's all unsigned bands, and there are heats across Belgium. And, it goes to, I think, heats, semi-final, final, and then you declare the winner. And normally, at least within Belgium, the band becomes quite big.
Yeah, dEUS, Das Pop, Goose, they're all former winners.
Compact Disc Dummies as well. I would say Belgium's LCD sound system also came from that. I went to a heat in Mechelen, which is another underrated Belgian city, I would say, and it was great. I had no idea what to expect. It was extremely diverse. I wasn't bored at all, and there was a band where I was like, "Well, these guys are going to be absolutely massive," and they've just put out an EP, and that was it. Yeah, I was really surprised. Like there's a lot of talent in Belgium.
So, as we were saying, Belgium has a kind of strange history, or recent history, or modern history of music. I took a wee dip back into the 1990s when things kind of seemed to start to happen, because a lot of people talk about this 90s surge of Belgian alternative acts, and some of the names that emerged from there are still sort of relevant. So we've touched on the Evil Superstars, from whence a lot of bands sprang. It seems like Belgium had its share of soft grunge pop, and then a lot of unusual indie acts that are kind of reminiscent of some of the the stranger Britpop that had happened just prior. So bands like Space or Divine Comedy make appearances in Belgium. They've got a really strange twist in indie. Evil Superstars had like moments of, I would say, early Beck, bits of Weezer, but then stuff like the Eels and the John Spencer Blues Explosion, there's a lot of like unusual production in it. It never just rocked out. It would always have like a drum machine or something
or a synth.
Or a synth, exactly. But they became like these leading lights of this kind of genre straddling weirdo rock, and it seems like it sort of set a tone for things that followed it. There were other things about. There's a band called Kay's Choice who do a sort of Alanis Morissette meets the Cranberries style grunge pop.
Nice.
Is that a fair assessment?
I really only know I'm Not an Addict, and yes, I think that's accurate.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. That's the song. There's a band called Zeta Swin, who the singer, the main man, Steph Carlin's, he worked at, he was in dEUS, and the thing is, when you listen to Steph Carlin's voice, you automatically think dEUS. Bury you, yes, all I can do, so you won't. Except he was only in dEUS until prior to the Ideal Crash, which I think is really strange because I assumed he'd been in them the whole way, but I think he started just contributing occasionally after that. There's a band called Nova Star who do this sort of like kind of cheesy mainstream indie, which is a bit like Keen but with slightly more interesting arrangements and chord changes and stuff. I wouldn't say they're quite as asinine as that. Das Pop were interesting, this kind of wacky, kind of twee baroque pop. I follow in your shadow, I'm going underground. Will you let me know when you're going out of town, and will you take me down? Again, bits of Divine Comedy. They've got an album called I Love from 2000 which jumps around a lot. It's interesting listening. With like his big riffs, then a little weirdo kind of like electronic drum beat. It's really eccentric, and again I think a bit like Evil Superstars, you started to see a pattern of these bands emerging that were not, they weren't conformist. They were not fitting into these sort of, is this an indie band, is this an out and out pop band? It's very strange. As we said, dEUS, they appeared in the late 90s, originally quite indie with a sort of fixation on stuff like Tom Waits. They brought out an album called Ideal Crash, which is absolutely going to feature in this show at some point because it's a really big moment, I think, in that late 90s indie. I love it. And Soulwax, who we also mentioned, 1995, their second album I think was the real breakthrough, much against everyone's advice. Did really well. Was that 98 that came out, I think? And the two, how do you pronounce the name?
Diwali, I think.
Diwali brothers. Yes. So they're the two guys that became Too Many DJs, which in its own right became a huge project. I would also say, and this may well be an album that comes up in the future as well, but if you're not sure about Soulwax, listen to their fourth album, the relatively recent From dEUS. Which is so fucking interesting and cool. So just so if this will sell you on it, they now have Igor Cavalera from Sepultura drumming with them. He's one of 3 additional drummers. The whole album was recorded live
in one take,
in one take. 3 drummers and these 2 guys doing electronics, and it's fucking really good. It's really interesting, and I think that kind of like epitomises this kind of weird, bold sort of fearlessness of like Belgian alternative pop. It just seems to be comfortable knowing that it's maybe got limited crossover potential or mainstream potential, but trying to do things that are quite satisfying. Into the 2000s, some of those bands carried over. dEUS, the sort of phase 2 of dEUS, got a wee bit rockier, bits of funk. There's still some quite good records, although they're a wee bit inconsistent. Creature with the Atom Brain, we've mentioned, quite Queens of Stone Age. Hyper Christmas Tree Fuzz, who we talked about in the Muse one, that's a bit more recent. A band called the Hickey Underworld.
Yes, who I saw Tim Vanhamel play with in 2015. Yes, 2015.
Their self-titled album's excellent. But Mark, you might have noticed that the name of the band comes from a Nation of Ulysses song, Hickey Underworld. But you know, Tim Vanhamel doesn't list them on his bio or his wiki or anything like that.
I think because he's probably only playing live, probably not contributing songwriting duties. This is what happens.
They're a good band. They're kind of like a power pop band, a bit rockier, but they've got some really, really good hooks in them. There's a band called School is Cool, who I think also won the Humo thing, didn't they?
Car, backseat, parking lot. We didn't do much, but it cost a lot. Glass half empty and as good as full. It's like a magnet.
Again, quite baroque pop that had some kind of fairly successful singles in Belgium. And the band dEUS, who we mentioned, a kind of electro indie rock, had a single called Audience that I think Coca-Cola used in a bunch of adverts that got them a lot of attention. I think it's some pretty cool songs as well. It's a bit cheesy, but it's well produced. So it's just, it creates this kind of weird picture of a country with these very unconventional trends in their pop and indie scene. Like, they really refuse to conform to sort of American, UK standards, and as a result I think they really did struggle to find their niche. The press, reading back in some of the reviews, Millionaire, the press really don't seem to know what to do with them.
I would add to your list of bands as well. I would maybe add Hooverphonic. Who were in Eurovision, who had some trip-hop success in the UK because they were out around that time. And I don't know if you know Triggerfinger, who did a song with Method Man, which I think is it's quite catchy, called The One. Money come first, fell face first in the game and got me my first call. First to ride, I'm like a fiend on his first now. First to get fired, the first day on his first job. But first things first, you're messing with the worst, baby. Give me the presidential, sweep me in the first lady. I make the first crazy purposely. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head on saying it doesn't conform to UK or US. You know, it draws influences from both, for sure. And yeah, maybe I think just Belgium is okay with it being weird. You know, if you don't understand it, that's fine. You know, it's not for you, and that's okay. And I think that attitude, leads to a lot of, you know, creativity and experimentalism without being judged. You know, humor isn't the enemy. You know, stringing people up and then bringing them down and making fun of them. So I think that maybe helps.
Well, they've got 4 albums, so we're obviously talking about the first one, but shall we take a wee dip into the other ones and quick tour?
Let's do it.
Mark, I don't want to steamroller you here. Anything you want to throw in at this point? Any dissenting voices? Any observations?
No, I mean, they're weird as fuck. And they love a bloody synth as well, don't they?
Oh,
I mean,
love a synth and a voice distorter, absolutely.
Yeah, and they're a fan of weird sounds. I don't mean synthy weird sounds. I just mean strange sounds that just chuck in seemingly at complete will, like at random. You know, it's utterly strange. Yeah, I guess I said they were fine is because I don't actually know what to make of them. And the last 2 records, or the latest 2 albums, didn't find them particularly engaging. But the first 2, yeah.
As someone who is also a much bigger fan of the first 2 albums, I think you do need a bit of distance, because both of the last 2 albums, when they first came out, I was like, oh no, this isn't the same Millionaire. But I've changed my opinion a little bit on re-listening to them as a whole, because I normally don't. I normally just listen to the songs that I like. So I will just say that.
Well, the first album we're going to do a wee bit more in depth, but I will say the first album sounds to me, there's a lot of production in it, but it's not overproduced. Now that seems a bit of a contradiction in terms, but there's a lot of character in it, a lot of like little tricks and tweaks. The songs generally sound quite distinct. There's not this one drum sound all the way through. It sounds like quite a lot of time's been spent in it. I don't actually know how much time was spent in it. I know that Tim was very heavily involved in the production, and therefore I suspect they probably did spend a lot of time tweaking things and playing and being quite adventurous. But it certainly doesn't sound overly full in its production. That's not to say it sounds thin, but compared to the Paradisiac, the second album, which they produced with Josh Homme, it does sound a lot more spacious. Paradisiac goes for much more of a full-on, saturated, confrontational kind of approach. This album actually got to number 9 in Belgium, which is not too bad considering the status of the band. We mentioned already one of the guitarists left during the recording. Now, just to dip into a few of the songs that I think, it's a really interesting record. I was, as an existing huge fan of Millionaire from the first album, somewhat disappointed by it when it first came out. As I noticed reading the reviews, a lot of people were. It bears repeated listening because some of the songs are really good. Some of the songs are just okay, but they're recorded in a way that's really interesting. And actually, to be honest, that's the case for Queens of Stone Age quite often as well. Now, you can hear Josh Homme, you can hear his involvement in the tones, the guitar EQs, just some of the studio effects that are used in it. The first track in it, I'm on High, is an interesting one. It's a big kind of stomper. This was, I think, co-written, wasn't it?
Yeah, by Mauro, yeah.
Mario Pawlowski. Is it Pawlowski?
I think, yeah, it's Mauro Pawlowski because I think he's half Italian, half Polish, or his parents were Italian and Polish, yeah.
So, it's a bit kind of boorish. There's a kind of swagger to that song. It's got an interesting arrangement in it. I mean, I really like that, it's got these kind of ravey, synthy stabs in it, but it's got this excellent, quite serpentine chorus that I think works really well. A Lust Unmatched. It just sounds like something off Songs for the Deaf when it kicks in, that kind of distant, muted riff that's happening. Big in style, big in attitude, I think, but not maybe the most brilliant musically. And I think that happens quite a number of times in this record where it sounds cool, but actually the tune isn't all that great. The strongest track in the album, I would suggest, is Street Life Cherry.
Rick, that's the only skippable song for me.
Really?
Really? Yeah. It's the one I like the least.
Oh,
yeah.
wow. Okay, hang on, let's dig into that a wee bit, because I think this is one of the tunes that really, really stood the test of time for me, even this one. Another really stompy one. I think it's got a catchy riff, it's really well paced, and I think there's enough weirdness matched with melody to bear up to those repeated listens. What is it that puts you off it?
I think it's his whiny vocals. It's na 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 na. I because it starts with the first 3 tracks that are quite heavy, and I'm actually quite on board, even though I totally agree with you that you can hear Josh Homme, and in a way I feel like Josh Homme made them less original because his fingerprints are all over it. I also think the track listing is terrible, because it's like all what's great about Outside the Simian Flock is that it goes from quiet to loud to quiet to loud, and yet it works. Here I don't think it does. They put all the quiet songs and all the louder songs together, and for a while I just listened to Up to We Don't Live There Anymore, which is one of my favorites, and then the other ones I was like, oh, this is a bit heavy for me actually. Like this seems completely distant from the rest of the album. But yeah, I think I do like the album as a whole, apart from Street Life Cherry, although like you, I was a bit disappointed that it wasn't quite as original. But I think that the testament for me is when I like the slower songs, it's a good album, because normally I don't. Rise and Fall and Ballad of Pure Thought are really nice slower songs. And I don't know if you know, but the Twilight Singers have covered Ballad of Pure Thought, and it's really good. But yeah,
that one in particular, it really stands up well. I mean, I think they have similar songs on Simian Flock, and I think pound for pound, these two are actually probably slightly better songs. That's not to say that I don't think they're as effective as the ones in Simian Flock, because as you say, the sequencing in this isn't quite as good.
Yeah.
So the power of these tracks is a little bit lost. I mean, Ballad of Pure Thought should never be sitting at number 8 on an album. It's too good. But there are also really heavy parts in the album. The song Alpha Male, I think, is the heaviest tune the band did. Hey, Alpha Male, now that's the skulls, now that's the skulls, oh man. Hey, Alpha Male, hey, Alpha Male, now that's the skulls, oh man.
Yeah, it's really intense. And Wake Up the Children, he is screaming. I was like, I don't think I like this. And then I just had to, sometimes with an album, you have to listen to the track separately. You can't listen to it in order, because you're not going to get the overall vibe. But yeah, I think if I had to pick a favourite song, it would be We Don't Live There Anymore. It's the most, I'd say, outside the Simian Flock, where you have this driving bass, then pure weirdness and some synths. And, you know, he's whispering, but he's also shouting, which, Tim loves to do a bit of that.
The loud whisper, that's a big...
Paradisiac. Yeah, okay.
Mark, what did you make of this when you were quite into it?
I quite liked Alpha Male. It's big and stompy. It's got a really nice bass sound and a nice drum sound as well. Ballad of Pure Thought had that kind of warped 80s alt-rock vibe to it, which they kind of do often. I like For a Maid because the main guitar riff is kind of twisted and the whole song's a wee bit discordant, you know?
Yeah, it's very odd, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a bit noisy, which I thought was actually quite fun and is really in keeping with her personality. Rise and Fall, that kind of hints at the direction the next record would go for me. But yeah, and Ballad of Pure Thought is probably my favourite after Alpha Male and I'm on High. I think they're all pretty good songs.
But that's the testament of it, isn't it? That your favourite song is, in a way, almost like the least Millionaire song on this record, and so different to the other two. So I think they still have the power here. I think this album still has some traditional Millionaire elements, like weird time signatures and sort of danceable hard rock, but definitely a different direction.
Yeah, I think you're right. Josh Homme did sort of flatten the dynamic a wee bit by pushing it too much. And what it doesn't have is those really clear, funky elements that the first album, and even in the Science and the next one, you can find, where the bass and the kick are going with a bit of space around them, and you can play it in a club. There's not really much on Paradisiac you can DJ in a club. Now, it was 12 years until they brought out Science in 2017. There isn't even a page for this in Wikipedia. Given how much I like the band, I am amazed that the first time I found out about this was just as we were finishing the recording on this episode. Yeah, and you were like, they've got 2 more albums. I was like, what? So immediately went and checked it out. I'm going to diverge from you guys here. I was very pleasantly surprised at how good this is. I don't think it's as good. It's maybe not even quite as good as Paradisiac, but in saying that, I didn't massively like Paradisiac at first, and it's grown on me a wee bit. It's definitely not as good as, it's nowhere near as good as Simian Flock. However, it does try to go back to that a wee bit. Again, I don't think the sequencing's quite right. I think there's a cluster of songs between about maybe 4, 5 and 6 that around that area that are a bit too quiet, all in the one place, and the album loses a bit of its momentum. But there are some really good moments in it. I think I'm Not Who You Think You Are, the opening track. I mean, it kicks off in really sassy, brash style. Vanhamel really sort of like, we're back. There's a bit of that to it. Sets a confident tone with this kind of big beat rock, and then a sort of quasi hip hop approach to the arrangement of the tune. Yeah. Love Has Eyes. Really mathy. It's like kind of very unusually mathy for the band. Some terrific drumming in that song. It reminds me of the band Urge Overkill if they were playing at Arctangent or something. It's like rock and roll, but it's got this very technical sort of element to it. I didn't actually know the drummer was as good as he is on this song. I think Wastelands in that record is great. I mean, it's got a really subtle bass line that is such a nice tone that's almost got an ASMR quality. If you listen to the bass line on Wastelands on good headphones, it is beautiful.
It's very
really,
trip hop.
It is, yeah. I really, really warmed to that song, and I've actually shared it with a few people who seem pretty into it as well. And again, the ghostly vocal approach thing, I think, really complements that arrangement. And the last one that I would pick out on that album, if you want to give it a wee check out, is Little Boy Blue.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. A kind of weird one for them. It's like a really patient foray into krautrock. I mean, I think it's like the first 3 minutes are just this sort of repeated motif, and then it starts to develop into a tune. It's got some lovely guitar effects in it for people that are into like tech head sort of stuff. There's some great sounding stuff in there. And it almost has like a kind of Ennio Morricone feel to it at parts later on. I was pleasantly surprised with this record. I think it's inconsistent. I think it's kind of poorly arranged, but it definitely was better than I was expecting.
Yeah, so I found a little bit of information that I hadn't found before on the Bandcamp page. So this album was recorded in Costa Rica because there's a guy called Jeff Clays, who I'd never heard of before, who is in Admiral Freebie, who I've heard of, and apparently in the John Spencer Blues Explosion. So there we go. There's the connection. So and
you can really hear that because seeing some of those John Spencer albums, you know, they really fuck around with the structure of rock music. They deconstruct and then reconstruct rock music, and it's something that Millionaire seem really, you know, kindred spirits on.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I'd never heard of this studio, and yeah, there's an Instagram account for it, and it is just a studio in the Costa Rican desert run by this guy who I'd never heard of. And what Tim said about the album was, now that I feel I'm a bit older, I feel the need more and more to make something that can also be beautiful. The groove is more important than ever, and this album is made in accordance with the less is more principle. I've admitted more guitar riffs than I've added. We don't feel the need to hit the listener over the head anymore, which personally I'm sad about. I like being hit over the head. But yeah, I think it was definitely an album I listened to a lot to try and feel something with it, and I felt like I really hadn't. And interestingly, I kind of picked out, apart from Little Boy Blue, I picked out different tracks from you. I liked Guru's Feet. I liked Silent River. I like Bloodshot and Visa Running. And I've put, chilled rock ballad, instrumental like Stoner Rock, country song meets Twin Peaks, so Ennio Morricone. So it is all over the place. I think it's because it's going into genres that I don't like as much. It's a bit more psychedelic and a bit more country. That's not my style. But actually, listening to it all the way through for the first time, I don't know, in about 2-3 years, I was like, I do like most songs. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm just like, right, I need to separate early and late Millionaire. I think I shouldn't see this as Millionaire because it doesn't really sound like Millionaire in a lot of respects, and just appreciate this as a different kind of album.
The songs that you've both mentioned are the ones that I picked out. I like Silent River. It's got a chill vibe. It's really languid, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
I guess another one that I have noted down here is Busy Man. It's got a nice dancey feel to it, I think. Some loud guitars in the pre-chorus and then like an uplifting chorus, which is a nice little touch. Again, just kind of fucking around the structures of songs, which is something they seem to do all the time. But Little Boy Blue for me is probably the best on the record. It's got some nice textures, which I enjoyed, and the vocals kind of give it a sense of dread as well. I think in places it's quite druggy, which I enjoyed.
I mean, when you realise that it's recorded in Costa Rica, you're like, oh yeah, this was recorded in a hot place. You do feel that, not Belgium.
It's a pure ayahuasca song, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I will say though, sort of come back into the fold. Apples, is it apples or not apples? Apples don't equal apples.
It's meant to be pronounced apples, not apples.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Isn't great. I think it's riffier, it's bluesier, it's got things like solos in it and a bit of like 70s rock. It does some sojourns into things that are almost Steely Dan or Eagles or something. There's a sort of older guy quality to it. I don't think it's entirely.
Well, he's in his 40s now, so
that's true. It's a bit inconsistent, a bit scattered, not as confident, I don't think, as their comeback album. It seems a little bit more tentative, the way it hits you.
Mm-hmm.
The third track in it, I don't know if you've noticed this, but it is absolutely nail on the head AM era Arctic Monkeys. Like, it sounds like an Arctic Monkeys song minus Alex's accent. And I do wonder if Millionaire maybe look back at some of their tunes and feel a wee bit aggrieved, because when we did Arctic Monkeys, I did mention that I am amazed that this album, especially AM, has got hit singles, because these are not the structures of typical pop hit singles. Do you know what I mean? They're very slow and buildy, and they really were relying on the band's rep and the general sort of esteem for Arctic Monkeys to make the songs good. People wanted them to be good, and therefore they were good. And I think you take a band like Millionaire and they look back through some of their catalogue and they're like, we've written stuff as good as that, and I think they have written stuff as good as that, and nobody batted an eyelid. And they're right, because it's not a meritocracy. And on Strange Days, I really heard them pitching to say, we can do Arctic Monkeys just as well as Arctic Monkeys. And it honestly, like, I think it's a doppelganger. I really, really do. The other ones in that stand out, Dig a Ditch, starts as like some sort of like Doobie Brothers fever dream.
Stand up and deliver. Keep your eyes on the prize.
Has this really cool falsetto diminished chorus with an excellent rotary effect on the guitar. where it sounds like it's been played through a fan. It's really cool in the right speaker. And then Blue Mountains White Sky, which has this big 70s psychedelic stoner jam to it. The guitar, and it's just nicely gained, it's not over distorted. The only issue I have with that song is that it goes into a bit of noodling, but the guitarist just doesn't really have the flamboyancy or the chops to make the solo and the noodling work. I don't know if it maybe would have benefited from like a guest performance or something where somebody really let rip and made the solo something that totally captured, you know, like Beat It, where you bring in a guest guitarist to do an absolutely amazing solo. It needed something like that to tip it over the edge, because otherwise it's actually quite a cool wee song. But the album overall, it just doesn't pop at all. It sounds a bit tired.
Yeah, I think re-listening to Science Sing made me realise, actually, overall, this is a good album. Re-listening to Apples Not Apples, I normally only listen to the songs that I'd saved and liked, and I really like those songs. So Dig a Ditch, Like You, definitely a standout, and Compact Disc Dummies, who I mentioned before, they've done a remix of it last year, which is really good, really synthy. My other highlights are Can't Stop the Noise, which to me is a heavier I'm Not Who You Think You Are, with more heavy guitars and distorted synths.
Can't stop the noise, bouncing off the wall. Can't stop the noise, ricochet through the hall. Can't stop the noise, no matter how you try.
I think my favourite is Whiplash, because that's the Millionaire I wish still existed. You know, there's complex guitar-based drums and then crazy jazz and synths.
Everything can wait, 'cause I got nowhere to go.
And then, yeah, the 70s influence also comes through in The Watchmen, because it's 70s rock, but with, I put weirdest time signatures and weird vocals, because I clearly run out of adjectives at that point. So I really enjoyed revisiting the songs that I liked and realizing that there was this remix of one of my favorite songs. It's not a terrible album, but I think you said it, it's inconsistent. I will say, as with, I think, all of Millionaire, and I hadn't really realized this, the drumming is great. I think I'm a bass player, and especially outside the Simian Flock has so many good bass lines and so many bass-driven songs. I hadn't really paid attention to the drums, but my God, they're good.
For me, one of the things that stood out was not because I particularly enjoyed the song, but Cornucopia. It reminded me of Jay Dilla. It's got almost got a hip hop feel, and it comes across in the way that he would kind of pull together samples to make it feel played. That is kind of like the actual played version of that. I think the production gives it that vibe. I think a lot of this song has that sort of hip hop feeling 70s sample vibe, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You know, the kind of that kind of R&B thing. Can't Stop the Noise is another good example of that. It feels, even though it's got a pitch shifted vocal, it's got an almost R&B atmosphere, like 70s R&B.
Yeah.
Even right up to the chorus. So there was some cool 70s things that are going on in the record, but it just doesn't really hang together for me in any compelling way.
I honestly feel like they're just not as sure of themselves on it. There's something non-committal about it.
If you're going to go fully 70s, go fully 70s, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you know, but Tim Vanhamel also had a solo album that is like properly acoustic, quiet. That I couldn't bear it. I could not bear it. I've tried many times to listen to it. But yeah, I think he's a genius. You know, even on this. But yeah, I think because he has so many strings to his bow, maybe sometimes it is unfocused, and maybe it would have benefited. You know, if not from a guest performance, yet just a bit more input.
Oh, I mean, he's all over the page in terms of he loves rap and hip hop as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can hear all of that informing all of his work throughout his career. He's a polymath in that sense, you know, but some of it doesn't seem to stick. You mentioned amazing bass lines, so we should get to Simian Flock. Outside the Simian Flock, 2000, got to number 50 in the Belgian charts, which is okay for a first record, I guess. Recorded in 2000 at Dada Studios. Actually, I think this came out 2001.
Yeah.
It was recorded in 2000, sorry, and it came out in 2001. Produced by a guy called Jmago Z Smon.
I did not know that. I don't know who that is.
No fucking idea. And Tim himself, 12 tracks, 52 minutes. I think it may be the shortest Wikipedia entry for any album we've covered on the show so far.
Did you put it in Dutch and see if it was longer? Because normally I do that and then I Google Translate it.
Good point. I think there are going to be comparisons here. Tim, to give a little glimpse of the future, and my Nexus has worked with people like Ninja from the Antwoord, and given the Prince comparison that we mentioned earlier on, there is a lot of like very strange, outright weirdness, and a lot of his earlier time in indie rock bands and grungier bands. It all starts to kind of coalesce into this. I would say it vaguely makes sense, and it does only vaguely make sense, because this album only vaguely makes sense. Now, I think it really works, and that's why it's genius, but it only just really works. Like, it's only a couple of decisions away from being a fucking mess, right? But it's not, and that's why it's brilliant. It's very much on that edge, and there is almost no better bass line in the history of modern alternative rock than Body Experience Review, the first track. Babs, how good is that fucking bass line?
That bass line is fucking good and very easy to play if you're a bass beginner. I do recommend it. And I mean, to put a song that's how long? 6:05 as an opener? I mean, that is
6:05 played in 5/4 timing as well is just what a ballsy choice for
I actually put ballsy as well. I literally put ballsy.
It's quite incongruous as well, because not that I don't want to say it doesn't match the rest of the album, because none of the album matches the rest of the album, but it's just very audacious, like as an opening statement. But it's fucking brilliant. Like, it's inspired. Like, it really forces you to meet them on their terms. They're like, this is our album, you're going to get with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's one of those, and Millionaire do this a lot on this album. You think it's going to be your normal indie song or your normal rock song. Okay, there's a bass, there's some drums. But then, you know, some scary violins come in a third of the way through. You know, then the bass and the guitar kind of build and build and build, and it turns into this kind of instrumental atmospheric madness. Yeah, you've said that you've played this, right, at Rock Nights, I'm guessing, and it works even at 6:05. I'm delighted to hear that, because
it mixes really well. The only thing is, because it's 5/4, people don't know what to do with their ass in that extra beat, so you get some really weird shapes. People banging heads and things. The overlapping kind of contrapuntal elements in it tend to throw people as well, but there is just an undeniable groove that runs through it. Like, as weird as the timing is, it's funky, it's got some real momentum, and it's not easy to make a song on an unconventional timing really trundle along like that smoothly. It's both obtuse and it's catchy. It's kind of elegant. Like, they very, very carefully scale it up, that crescendo of parts that you're describing, like the ingredients that they bring in and introduce. It's really, really mature, accomplished bit of songwriting.
And I mean, I can tell you, I had barely paid attention to any lyrics of any of these songs, and I have.
Me neither.
Well, I mean, I'm just like, my God, English is a second language, and the lyrics are, "You think that you're heaven sent, but you're just a malcontent." Bloody hell! Like, that's really impressive. And actually, looking at the lyrics, this album has themes. It definitely is more of a concept album than I realized. There's a lot about bodies, animals, sex, gender. There's a lot going on, and I feel this is a breakup song written by a conflicted arsehole, is how I've summarized it.
And as much as that starts kind of slow and measured, Ape and Friends just comes straight in. Nice contrast, loads of like interesting arrangements in that song as well. And I think Ape and Friends is one of the tunes that you can really hear the seeds of Paradisiac in it. It's a fuller, thicker, stronger, more powerful tune overall.
And another one that starts with bass and drums, driving bass and drums. Mm-hmm. And I think, Mark, you mentioned hip hop. I absolutely felt that in parts, and this is one of them. You know, his voice is an instrument, and the bass and drums are already so good, but the way his voice is distorted is incredible. I've written it's like he's rapping. It's a whole other synthy instrument, and yeah. I would play this one at an indie disco, definitely. 320 driving, people will definitely know what to do with their asses. Mm-hmm. And it's about, you know, being ripped off by someone. But I think, again, I remember my mum was really into the same kind of rock music I was, and I remember having discussions with her about, is it aping friends? Is it raping friends? I think there's a lot of wordplay. You know, we'll come back to that later in one of the songs. He loves to play with words, and I think one thing that I really hadn't realized until sitting down and reading with the lyrics, he loves to stretch out a word weirdly as well. When you're reading the lyrics in their lines, it's not consistent. He doesn't sing them in lines. He stretches out words and crushes syllables. He's a genius. In a second language, genius.
I think that both Body Experience with You and Ape and Friends have the exact same fat, funky bass tone, which is why I like them both, which is why you can totally hear the hip-hop in the second one, Ape and Friends. And the first one is pure Prince. Even the guitar in that is the same. I like in Ape and Friends, I really like how well the vocals sit in the mix, and the keyboard sounds are really nicely chosen. And the reason I say that is because there's a lot of really annoying fucking keyboard sounds on this record and on all the records, frankly. And that will come up soon. But I like it, you know. I think the guitars feel really stonery on it as well, which is something they come back to a lot too.
Well, especially in the next two songs. So the track 3, Me Crazy, You Sane. It's like Weezer's weird cousin. It's quite chill and fun, and also about 2.5 minutes into this is the first really prominent Queens of the Stone Age moment where they drop into this kind of anti-solo with some really excellent chord changes underneath it.
It sounds like Dinosaur Jr. to me.
Yeah.
That's cool.
That's interesting because I've gone. The beginning is solid Belgian indie fare for me. It sounds like Girls in Hawaii, which is a band from Wallonia. That if you like this song, you will definitely like them. You know, you've got an acoustic guitar, bass drums. It's all very light, but then it wrong foots you once again because it goes crazy psychedelic, key change. You know, he's even singing backwards when he's talking about being me crazy, you sane. And it's a quieter song and one that I skipped for a while. I was like, no, I want the driving bass again. But actually, even though it's probably my least favorite on the album, I still like it. And lyrically, I think it's the opposite protagonist from Body Experience Review. This is someone trying to break up with someone and saying, "Oh, you know, it's not you, it's me," which is quite interesting.
So a bit like Dominoes, the end of that song I think has that real first ingredient of Queens of the Stone Age, and then Champagne, the fourth track. A standout song, I think, just generally. One that is so good to DJ, quite apart from the fact that it's mostly instrumental. It's very reminiscent of the first Queens of Stone Age album, and especially, you know, if you're into that band, you'll get what I mean, because the first Queens of Stone Age album was auteured by Josh Homme, and there is a real feeling of this being auteured by Tim as well. The song again has a really excellent groove and roll. It's a total head bobber. The weird vocals in it, the vocals again used much like an instrument or a synth. They're not used as vocals per se. by 3.5 minutes into the song, it's disintegrated into almost silence. It goes right down. There's loads of dynamic in it. This little kind of like quirky thing that fades up. I think you can actually hear him fading the channel up and down on his vocal as he's singing before it kind of very quickly swells back out into the big established groove of the song. I think it's fucking brilliant. This is, as I say, one of the tracks that since I first heard it to now, I think the same amount of enjoyment out of it. I just think it's absolutely tremendous.
I agree. It's the biggest song, you know, it's the most well-known one. And Fran and I actually I picked it for the Belgian episode that I did of our podcast. So we did a Belgian special where I picked sort of 10 bands to talk about. And of course I talked about Millionaire. And Fran was like, oh, the intro's too long. And I was like, no, what are you talking about? Like I like the way it builds. Not just the intro to the singing, like you said, when it goes quiet and he's, you know, doing his bleep bloops and going up and down. The way it brings it back to that groove that you had in the beginning is fantastic. And yeah, I've written indie banger. Not that I've heard it in any indie club, but I imagine, yeah, it goes down very well.
You should have been in my indie club. In fact, I've played it in Unsung Podcrash.
Yeah, that weren't the ones that nobody came to. Was that one of those?
Yeah, you know, or if they were there, they left. But that's what I do.
Yep, I think it's a good song as well. Queens of Stone Age vibes all over it for sure. I like when the vocals kick in and, like you say, Chris, it's got it feels more like an instrument. All this weird kind of swirling filters that they've got on the vocals.
Yeah.
And then it's just towards the end, it's like a whirlwind of strange harmonies, vocal harmonies, which is dead unusual, and kind of made me go, oh, that's a really cool thing. I never thought you could do that before with vocal production. That's pretty cool. Yeah, it's a good listen, that song.
That's what I mean. I think this album sounds baked. I think it sounds like he's sat and really sort of gone over it with a fine-tooth comb, adding interesting ingredients to almost every single component on it. It's painstaking and, you know, a labour of love. Fifth track, Blindfold.
If you don't, then you will find yourself rolling in corners, rolling in circles, cannonball.
Really sombre, uneasy, queasy sort of, I would say ballads, but it's a shanty vibe to it, a very strange one. It's quite bitter, but I think what that really only does is serve to kind of emphasise the sweetness of the choruses when the accordion comes in.
Have to make a choice now.
Really idiosyncratic and sort of shows their kind of kindred spirit thing with dEUS as well.
Yeah, I've written what a tonal shift, because I mean, I think Me Crazy Usain is a bit of one, but this one absolutely blindsided. Having just done an episode on the Stranglers, this is their Golden Brown / La Folie, where this band who's very heavy suddenly has this incredibly sensitive song with beautiful strings, a plaintive guitar, accordion, as you say. Feels very kind of French influenced. I feel that's the vibe that I'm
unsettling though, in a similar way to Golden Brown.
Yeah. But what is it? I think it's the strings. The strings make it unsettling for me, because if it was just the guitar and the singing, but they're driving. And yeah, I think it's one of my favorites. It's absolutely beautiful and sounds absolutely nothing like a Body Experience Review or Aping Friends or Champagne. It's something completely different, and yet it works. The sequencing works. You've just had a very intense, long instrumental song. Now this comes in, and it's great. It's the only one I have no idea what the hell it's about. He just talks about letting go of these blinds. But I will just add very quickly that Champagne seems to be about BDSM. Just to carry on the themes there.
Nice.
Good for him.
See, Blindfold, it's definitely the cello and definitely the vocal melody just remind me of Cursive.
That's
one of those bands I don't know enough about.
Their album, The Ugly Organ, has got cello all over it. They had a cello player in their band at the time.
But Babs, we've got a full episode on those guys and that album. We've did the deep dive. So, you know, another thing that Blindfold doesn't sound like, it's the following song, Come With You. Now, we need to almost fence off this song, because this song is one of the most remarkable things, I think, in European kind of indie music.
Oh.
Full stop. I mean, I think it's absolutely bizarre I remember seeing the video for it on MTV2. That was bizarre. Everything about this song is bizarre. Like, where did this song come from musically? It's, you know, it's that Venn diagram that we spoke about between rock and pop and indie, and what the fuck are this band trying to do? It comes in like a Fine Young Cannibals song with that drum beat, you know, that even the tones of it. The Prince buzzer, just be hammering that all day because it's trying to do that sort of punk Prince thing. I think for me this is a bona fide classic. I've DJ'd it loads. It's the song that people come up and say, what the fuck are we listening to? This is amazing. But what I really like about it is that it doesn't stay as a kind of twee sort of funk pop song. It becomes dissonant and nasty towards the end. Like, they shred it. Like, they take this song and they put it through a shredder. Like about 220, when those big chord rises start to come in, you can still tell that they're starting to fuck with the formula a bit. It's about 3 minutes when the noise rock really starts to kick in, and you know, there's parts of it early on that really remind me of like Black Grape in the Manchester baggy scene, but like them passed through like a what's that pedal, the Boss pedal, the Metal Zone. It's got some kind of like weird mutilated version of the Manchester baggy scene going to it, and then it finishes with this like spanky funk guitar which is straight ripped out of fucking Paisley Park. Like, it's a really, really strange blend of ingredients, and I'm really, no offence, Babs, but I'm really curious to get Mark's take on this, given that he's not a card-carrying devotee.
The vocal just annoyed the arse right off me, man. I couldn't sit through it as a result, honestly. It was just too much for me. The middle eight with the dancey style breakdown, I think, was really fucking cool. There's lots of interesting effects on it, for sure. I like that it's almost funky in places, but I couldn't get past the vocal at all. I just couldn't get past it.
Almost funky, almost. Oh my god!
Like I said, I couldn't get past the vocal, man. So there's probably more of this song than I even know.
Babs, bring us back.
Musically, I don't have too much to add. I will add that I really like in the verses where there's these dueling guitars that feels like two people having a conversation. There's this and it feels like two people having a conversation because obviously, again, about sex. This was the one that, as you say, I was the most Prince. I written that the end sounds like robots banging as well. and yeah, I wouldn't say it's in the middle for me, actually. Like I do like it a lot, but I think I admire its construction more than like it as a song compared to others. I will also add that the B-sides from the single, Crippled Love and God is a Plot, are absolutely worth checking out. Especially God is a Plot. It's like a heavy Summer Pass Me By in 7/4. Go! Driving guitars, bass, menacing strings, and the most guitar solo you get from this era of Millionaire. Really recommend it.
Totally sold. She's a Doll. That's a fucking weird tune, off kilter, kind of really low key, has a kind of hip hop-esque back-end loop and a drunk guitar line all the way through it. I was only about a minute 20 into it. It shifts into this dreamy indie picked progression that I think also stops it being throwaway because it brings in a really kind of much richer melody, and the vocoder was a really clever touch in this one as well.
Yeah, I find this one way more disturbing than Blindfold. I think maybe because of the lyrics of She's a Doll, it sounds creepy, like he's shagging a doll or something. And but it's again another tonal shift. It's gone from the rawness of Come With You to something very delicate. I called the vocoder bit the sexy boy section. It really sounds like Sexy Boy by Air, which I'd never really thought about. Another one where, because it was slower and weird, I was like, I don't think I like this, but now I'm charmed. Yeah.
There's an effect in it which is like a door creaking open.
Yeah, it's so creepy.
It's
so
kinda
fucking
weird.
creepy.
Yeah, it's weird. A lot of strange guitar effects on it as well. Again, listening to it going, I never thought about doing that with guitar before. That's pretty neat.
Another tune that I think nods towards what was to come with Paradisiac is Petty Thug, the 8th one, heavy riff. Albeit, I will say the notes are heavy, but the tones are actually quite clean. In my mind, this is quite a distorted song, but when you actually listen to it, it's not all that overdriven. He does the loud whisper vocal really well in this one. It works a treat. The choruses, I think, are a masterclass in how just inserting a little bit of space into a riff and a groove can really completely change something, and it frees up so much room for the vocal hook. And it's also got this really interesting motif at the end of the chorus lines that just sounds so much like INXS, where the guitar goes along with the little irregular drum fills. INXS all the way.
I never made the INXS connection, but yeah, that makes sense. I think this is the sexiest song ever written. I'm going to put you mentioned the bass line for Body Experience Review. This is one of my favorite bass lines of all time, which I finally learnt to badly play last year. I find it an addictive song. It's the same bass line almost all the way through. There's the bit with the bass line and the verses. It's a great hook. Prince when you're not expecting it. And again, urgent guitar driving to the climax. I bloody love this song. Really, one of my favorite songs of all time. Really, fantastic.
It's got a great head bobbing kind of beat to it, which I like. I'm going to borrow a word from Weaver here and call it wonky. It's a very wonky song. It sounds a bit wonky. Yeah.
I would have said that about She's a Doll as well. That's mega wonky too.
Yeah.
It was one of those where when I was learning on bass, I was like, surely this is going to have some weird tuning. I don't think it does. They just make it sound wonky in another way.
Her Gender, Fixed, track 9. Fucking hell, that is a Stratocaster tone there. You can hear the plastic in it. It's so bold. Again, I think the verse weirdness really accentuates the surges of noise that come in. I think it's quite bratty. Overall, I think it just sounds like a little bit sort of insolent as a tune. 2 minutes 45 in this song, though. It goes full on Beach Boys. And then finishes with this really driving melodic bridge, and then disintegrates into a very dreamlike, hazy decay. It's a very strange construction of a tune, but again, it's very them.
Again, and it somehow works. Yeah, bratty is the right word. You have the jarring, and now she's here, and now Butcher is here again, sounding much more staccato. And the topic, I mean, it seems to be about a trans woman. This is from 2001. I mean, it's a bit sensationalist because, I mean, it's basically about a trans woman who wants to cut off her penis, basically, from what I can see. Really, it's like to be boyish, she's taped to flat her breast. The butcher is coming to get her what she wants, etc., etc. But I mean, that was very clear to me already listening in 2002 or 3 when I discovered it, and I thought, you know what, fair play to them. Who is singing about this in
getting out ahead of the crowd?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, to side note, Belgium has the highest ranking trans minister. The deputy prime minister is a trans woman. I don't think that's going to happen in the UK anytime soon. But yeah, I think it's extremely original in every way.
I think there's a bunch of things about this song that I like. The chorus is pretty catchy. They take a lot of the weird elements that they kind of pepper throughout the song and then create layers of hooks with it, which is really good. but I have to turn it off towards the end because there's that high-pitched whistling sound which just I can't listen to. I physically can't listen to it. I have to
with the
just turn it off.
falsetto as well. If you don't like that, it might be probably a bit much. Yeah,
It's too much for my ears to take.
Flame Up, 10th one. Direct, snotty, keeps it simple for the verses. The choruses are quite like Devo. I don't know if you listen to a lot of Devo, but there's a lot of like head bopping in that kind of vein. And 2 minutes it goes into a big rock out ending where it starts to get quite dissonant as well. I think that track's a lot of fun.
Yeah, this song is my online identity. I am at Flame Me Up. I've been at Flame Me Up and at various email addresses since about 2003. So song means a lot to me, even though, you know, when I started working and my Twitter handle was still Flame Me Up, I was like, is this appropriate? Oh, fuck it. I don't care. Yeah, I think for me, it's a companion to come with you in Aping Friends where, you know, the faster, catchier songs. And it is one of the more straightforward songs, but that's saying something, especially when you hear the end.
It's a pretty cool song, and I enjoy that. It's quite straight ahead for them.
Yep. Nothing Left as you're getting towards the end, the penultimate tune. Big riffy. It's sort of like a comedy cover of Alice in Chains. Did you notice that the vocals are very, very similar to Alice in Chains?
I thought it looked like Smashing Pumpkins. The vocals reminded me of Smashing Pumpkins.
But see that diminished harmony that they do. That is honestly that's a classic Lane Staley. Also includes some clever kind of modified bar lengths as the song goes on. There's some quite unusual kind of writing in it, but just a big chunker.
Yeah, and for me, I think this is the closest to what would come to Paradisiac, actually, because it's very sludgy and played out. Much heavier guitars from the off, but there's still synths and his robot voice. I really hadn't appreciated how many layers of Tim Vanhamel's voice are on there.
And then I guess we end with Summer Passed Me By, right?
Which I would describe as post-coital. You know, this is like the morning after. There's an air of exhausted euphoria to this song. I think it's a really fitting kind of dazed, hazy ending to what's a bit of a workout of an album. You know, it is 52 minutes. There's an awful lot going on. It's a lot to digest, and it takes years to get to grips with it. Yeah, I think they wanted to see it through, and they wanted to finish it on a suitable note.
Yeah, I think this is a perfect ending to the album. Although to start with Body Experience Review and finish with this, bloody hell, you know, again, balls. I think it links to the previous song a little bit. With Nothing Left, it's very existential angst, if you look at the lyrics. Whereas this one is, I can't let the summer pass me by. And I think an album called Outside the Simian Flock, there's a lot of meditation, I think, on what it is to be human. And it ends on this kind of more hopeful note. And I think it definitely is a more chilled out song. But the bombastic second chorus, when the drums come in, it soars for me. And to the song finishes, it's just Tim and his acoustic guitar. And yeah, I think it's a fitting end to a quiet, loud, bad album.
Yeah, I like how understated and pared back it is, and then it has a loud bit with which I think is a siren whale.
Yes,
like a keyboard.
Yeah,
yeah. And then the quiet outro. It's a bit of it's a total up and down song, but I think it's a good closer for the album.
So, I mean, there is absolutely no question whatsoever that I think this is one of the most deserving unsung albums, full stop, that I know of. It would definitely be my top 10 of things that qualify for that title. It's super ambitious. It was so close to not working. It's certainly never got the credit that I think it deserves. I think it's got some genuinely really good singles on it. I think it's got tracks on it that work well in a DJ context, or at least an indie disco context. It just unfortunately, didn't fit into boxes at the time, still doesn't fit into boxes, and maybe that made it fall through the cracks of music journalism. I've seen it happen many times. People either don't know how to digest it or just aren't willing to digest it. I saw some absolutely mental reviews of Millionaire from, your kind of local gazette, the Lincolnshire Times and all this kind of stuff. Just fucking absolutely bananas from people who obviously spend their time listening to like David Gray, and then they're getting presented with this, and I think that's kind of the problem that faced them. Who knew what to do with it? I think it's terrific. I really do, and I think they've, Paradisiac's decent. They've got some good stuff in science, but this is still their Goldilocks zone.
I couldn't agree more. This is one of my favorite albums. I don't think there's a bad song on there, as much as I have my favorites. And given what the ideal crash by dEUS could be better known, but it gets the kudos. This absolutely deserves the same amount of kudos. Mm-hmm. It's funny because I think I found the reviews that were quite positive about it. There was one from Spin, which is absolutely hilarious. It just starts, kitchen sink experimentalist Tim Vanhamel has spent quality time with art-damaged Belgian brethren. you get it. But there's another review from Now Toronto, which talks about it's Captain Beefheart Goes Disco, like Beck Before Odelay, Billy Corgan, Pixies, Kaya, Stevo, the Neptunes. Yeah. Totally, which the Neptunes, I think, as a side note, Chris, when I saw Hyper Christmas Tree Fuzz live, they did a cover version of a Neptune song, which was great. I always wonder with all Belgian bands, not just Millionaire, of just, do they not have the right A&R people between the countries? Because they were on Pious, which is a Belgian label with a lot of British bands. One of the first concerts I saw in Belgium was a Pious night where there was Alt J editors, Andy Burroughs, the great Belgian band Balthazar that I recommend checking out as well. But are they just not promoting bands in England? Do they not go and play in England and other countries? The only Belgian bands I've seen doing that recently is Cocaine Piss, who are a punk band, and they're coming over to the UK, and I really recommend them. But I don't know what it is. I think for me it goes back a little bit to the fact that dEUS didn't want to move away from Antwerp. It's like, yeah, actually, we're happy here. We have our fame here and some comfort, and maybe that's it. I don't know if these bands are happy with the fame that they got. And at least Tim Vanhamel got to go to the US. The Paradisiac we didn't mention, but it was recorded in LA. But yeah, I don't understand. It ticks so many different sorts of boxes that they don't have more fans. But yeah, probably difficult to pigeonhole, as you say.
Well, Mark, it's a big moment.
Much like you were with Slayer last week, Chris, my opinion doesn't really matter, right? I'm going to sit in the fence with it. I don't know if I'm going to go back and listen to this band again, but I can appreciate the record for what it is, and appreciate the audacity of it more than anything else, and the sheer ambition of it, and all the really strange decisions they made is bold, and I like that about it. Musically, maybe I just need more time with it, but I'm just going to sit on the fence because I feel as though I should say yes, but also I didn't enjoy it enough to say yes, if that makes sense, even though I can appreciate it on an intellectual level.
You do you.
Mm-hmm. I have just done
it was interesting to hear that, once or twice you were like, oh, they do things that I didn't realise, you could do, I hadn't thought about doing. I think that's testament to an album that's over 20 years old, still making people feel like that.
Well, I am psyched that I got that out of my system. That's another one exercised. Shall we do the Nexus?
Yes, we shall.
A complicated series of connections between different things.
So, it's Nexus time. Babs, we didn't give you nearly enough notice to do this Nexus, right? So, let's... Mark, I understand you've got two, so how about we sandwich each other? How about that?
Always wanted to sandwich.
Is that what I'm witnessing right now? Okay, I'll go.
All right, well, this week's Nexus was chosen by, of all people, Crag,
Yeah.
Who else would choose this particular phrasing? It is Jack Black's Maw. And the thing is, I was like, that rings a bell. I think I said this last week when we pulled it. I was like, that rings a bell. I think I've actually had a conversation with Craig about this. He's done that as a provocation because Jack Black's Maw is actually somebody really quite exceptional. And
Yes, it really is.
He is being ironic.
Should we explain what the Nexus is first, Chris, before we launch into it?
The Nexus is where we try and do 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon between the artist of the week, in this case Millionaire, and a name as chosen by one of our listeners and selected from a little tub. And we'll try and make it interesting. I'll try and include Nazis. Mark will try and go through movies. I don't know what he's got up his sleeve, but how's about we find out?
So when I was doing the research for this and I realised that Paradisiac was produced by Josh Homme, it just fell into place immediately for me. Josh Homme, Queens of the Stone Age. Jack Black performed on Queens of the Stone Age song, and his mum is Judith Love Cohen, i.e. Jack Black's Ma. And that's how easy it was. And I didn't even have to Google that. It was just right in my head immediately.
The thing is, Weaver will be raging because when we drew this out the tub last week, Weaver says, I want you to do it without going through Jack Black.
Yep. And my next one, which is my real one, doesn't have Jack Black in it.
Right, okay. Well, in that case, I'll go because I did choose this, I suppose. Millionaire frontman Tim Vanhamel appeared on stage in 2008 at Pukkelpop Festival with Max Normal, as well as collaborating on a particularly strange song called Lonely Days. Max Normal, for those that don't know, was one of the many early names of a project that eventually became known as dEUS, featuring Yolandi and Ninja. Ninja, also known as Watkin Tudor Jones, played a character called Ninja in the movie Chappie. He was affectionately described by his colleagues on the set as pure evil, accused of propositioning and sending sexually explicit videos to female crew, tricking Dev Patel into eating a weed brownie. Neil Blomkamp apparently wrote them out of a scene so he wouldn't have to deal with them, and recut the trailers to exclude Ninja as much as possible, and has also gone on record as saying he never wants to be in a room with them again. Seems like a smashing guy. Neil Blomkamp directed District 9, which is a lot better than Chappie. Spike Lee actually singled out District 9 on a list of his favourite films that he was asked to do for Twitter. I think it was 10 films. He particularly recommended it on the basis of its treatment of apartheid via the metaphor of the aliens in the film. Spike Lee directed the film Malcolm X. Okay, in the film Malcolm X, and I didn't know this is one of my favourite facts of the week, there was a school teacher, which was a cameo by Nelson Mandela.
There you go.
Wow.
There you go.
Did he not die?
Yeah.
Did he not die in prison in the 80s, or did I make that up?
No, very good. The Mandela effect. I did wonder about doing the Mandela effect. At Nelson Mandela's 70th birthday concert in Hyde Park in 1988, when he was still in prison, he got out 2 years later, the show concluded with a performance by Dire Straits featuring Eric Clapton. So let's just reiterate that. At Nelson Mandela's 70th birthday concert in Hyde Park, Nelson Mandela, who fought against apartheid, one of the all-time greatest black icons, the birthday tribute in Hyde Park was concluded by the track, I think, Wonderful Tonight with Eric Clapton. Eric Clapton, a guy who on stage said, get the wogs out, get the coons out, keep Britain white, and Enoch Powell was right. Further irony, Eric Clapton had a US #1 hit with a cover of I Shot the Sheriff by Bob Marley and the Wailers. I mean, Eric Clapton, we've mentioned him a lot in here, but you never get tired of pointing out to new people what a piece of shit. Bob Marley and Rita Marley's son, Ziggy Marley, voiced Ernie, the Jamaican jellyfish, in the movie Shark Life. And Shark Life illustrations were used in a reissue of a book, You Can Be a Woman Animator, which was part of a You Can Be series. This one came out in 2004. I think the original series came out in the 90s. And those were written by Judith Love Cohen, who also happens to be Jack Black's mom.
Very well done.
Wow. Impressive.
Well, we're going to go down the rabbit hole with this one, so fucking buckle up. So Millionaire contributed 2 songs to the soundtrack of a Belgian film called Ex-Drummer, which is a Belgian...
Which I didn't mention.
Yeah. Do you want to explain what that film's about, since you saved me doing it?
Oh my God. It is about 3 disabled musicians who go and ask a famous writer to be in their band. And it is one of the most intense, disturbing films I've ever seen in my life. And let's just say there is a lot of blood. There is male rape with the band with a giant penis. They ironically call themselves the feminists because absolutely they're not. And the credits come up the screen backwards at the end. It's brutal, but the Millionaire songs on it are great, and they play live in the film.
Nice. The film starred a chap called Sam Lewick, and he's been in a lot of films. He's a Belgian actor. One of the films he was in was a film called The Bouncer, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme, of course. Can't have an episode about a Belgian band and not mention the Muscles from Brussels, can you?
Muscles from Brussels. There's a statue of him in a very weird place that I discovered recently. Yeah, I'll send it to you afterwards. Yeah.
How weird.
It's basically on a busy road outside a shopping centre. I was cycling and I was like, what the fuck is that Jean-Claude Van Damme? And stopped to take a photo with it. And you think, he's one of the most famous people from Brussels. This is in the wrong place. I'll send you a picture afterwards.
The Muscles from Brussels, the chode in the road.
Anyway, sorry to keep interrupting you with Belgian facts, Mark.
I've actually got a bit of weird Jean-Claude Van Damme trivia if you guys want to hear it.
Bring it.
So not a lot of people know that I actually really fucking love cars, right? I love cars, and I follow quite a lot of YouTubers. But one of them's a guy called Tyler Hoovey, who's got a YouTube channel called Hoovey's Garage, and he keeps buying cars that in America they're called Toopties because they're fucked up, and he spends lots of money that he gets from YouTube subscribers to buy like these horrible cars and fixes them up. One of the cars he bought was Jean-Claude Van Damme's Bentley. And he had it for a long time, and it was totally fucked, and I can't imagine how much cocaine was done in that car.
Jean-Claude Van Damme's Bentley was all fucked up. I imagine it got all fucked up like the bonus round in Street Fighter 2. Have you ever done that?
You won that, just like punching it. Anyway, The Bouncer is a film noir starring Jean-Claude Van Damme, and he's a criminal who becomes a bouncer and then gets involved in a fight with some gang members, and he sees some trade jail time for being a snitch for the police. He's obviously a legend, right? And he's been in lots and lots of films, including the 2013 classic Welcome to the Jungle, which is a film about a group of office workers that go away on like a team building trip, and their plane crashes. He's billed as one of the top stars, but he dies like halfway through the film. I hate it when they do that in films. Like, one of the top acts is like just unceremoniously binned like really early into it.
Do you remember an executive decision where about 20 minutes into the film, Steven Seagal falls at an aeroplane?
Yeah.
And Steven Seagal, Jean-Claude Van Damme, not the nicest of guys.
Yeah.
So you didn't mind to say that.
That film stars Adam Brody from the OC, and also Kirsten Shaw, who is just a great comedic actress. She's been in so many great things like Bob's Burgers, The American Office, What We Do in the Shadows TV series, BoJack Horseman, 30 Rock, Toy Story. She was also in a Funny or Die parody of Donald Trump's The Art of the Deal called Donald Trump's The Art of the Deal, the movie, and she stars in it alongside Ron Howard. Ron Howard directed Apollo 13, and this is when Judith Love Cohen's brilliance, I guess, comes to light. Is Judith Love Cohen, she helped create the missile guidance system for the Minutemen missiles, and also the abort guidance system that was used throughout the entire Apollo program. It was actually that system which helped the Apollo 13 lunar module to get safely back home, even using it to make 2 flight corrections on the way back from the moon and landing it on Earth. And she's one of the unsung heroes, I guess, of the entire Apollo program. Not just for that one massive thing, but also the fact that she helped engineer the stuff that helped get men on the moon, which is pretty fucking cool.
Can I make that even more impressive as a fact? Because sort of apocryphally, Judith Love Cohen was heavily pregnant at the time, and she went into labour, but there was an uncorrected calculation on a document. She took the document into hospital as she went in labour and corrected it while she was in labour, and contacted Houston and told Houston that she'd solved it, and then gave birth to Jack Black.
Amazing. And she is, of course, Jack Black's mom.
Mm-hmm.
So, that is our next high for the week.
Yeah, I did know that. I'm devastated that I didn't have the time to get involved because, not who you'd expect to be Jack Black's mom.
Exactly, yeah.
So, Babs, I'm so pleased that you were up for doing that album. Thank you very much. Given that there are so few Millionaire fans that are not from Belgium, we have to keep up the good fight.
Absolutely. This was, an absolute pleasure. I also feel like I got a lot off my chest as well from over the years.
And we slandered Flanders. So
that's fine. You know, I can slander Wallonia as well. I mean, you already slandered Charleroi, so I feel like it's even now.
Mark, I believe it's your week next week.
Yeah, so next week we're going to do a classic, For Your Own Special Sweetheart by Jawbox, which is an album I've wanted to do since before the podcast began. One of the ones I think we probably discussed back in the early days when we were talking about Fugazi and stuff like that. So it's time to pull the ripcord and get that one out from under us.
It's a big one. Last mentioned when we were with Jonah. Matranga, when we did the interview with Jonah. Yep. But we'll get to that next week, and we shall be nexusing that to Man Parish.
Is that a brothel?
Who knows? Man Parish, as chosen by Davy Bright. Anyone?
Man Parish is an American songwriter.
Not a brothel.
There you have it. Obscure. Let's see what we can turn up.
Oh wow, he's worked with Kraftwerk and stuff like that. Oh, that's interesting.
Any Nazi ties?
Don't think so.
Yeah, I'll find them. All right, Babs, thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure, thank you.
Have a good night. Mark, what you up to next?
I'm gonna just finish watching Yellow Jackets, which is fucking great, and I recommend it.
Everyone keeps talking about it. I need to find a way to watch it.
Yeah, it's really good.
You guys, have fun. Night night.
Bye.
Bye.